was a quiet town, the kind where everyone thinks they know everyone else. But in Rockhampton, Queensland, in 1998, a shadow hung over the streets. A young girl vanished without a trace, and fear crept into every home. Parents watched their children with wary eyes. Whispers filled the playgrounds, and the city's calm mask began to crack. And then, just months later, another disappearance shook the town. Natasha Ryan, only 14 years old, walked out of her house for a simple afternoon stroll and never came back, at least not alone. What happened to her during those terrifying days? And what secrets did her young boyfriend, Scott Black, hold? Tonight, we unravel the chilling story of a girl, a town, and a mystery that refuses to fade. Natasha Ryan was born in 1984 in Rockhampton, Australia. Her parents were Jennifer and Robert Ryan. Natasha was the youngest in the family and had an older brother and sister. She grew up happy, and we could say she had a normal childhood, spending her days peacefully with her parents and siblings. But when she entered adolescence, her first problems began, likely due to her parents' separation. Her father, Robert, fell in love with another woman and went to live with her, while the children stayed with his ex-wife, Jennifer. Living with her mother and seeing her father so rarely, coupled with the loss of the stability her family had always provided, literally threw Natasha into a crisis. As she grew, Natasha became a beautiful young girl with straight brown hair and a slightly freckled face. Her beauty was simple and natural. However, due to the separation and the turmoil of adolescence, she began to become somewhat unstable, and that once smiling face started to appear more troubled. As I mentioned, Natasha became a bit rebellious. Whenever she argued with her mother, she would run away from home. At school, she became inconsistent, skipping many lessons and not putting in much effort. With her friends, she started experimenting with cannabis, and one day, perhaps in the grip of a personal crisis or after yet another argument with her mother, she even tried to cut her wrists. The city where they lived, Rockhampton, located in Queensland, was not small at all. Today it has more than 80,000 inhabitants, and in the 1980s, the average population was around 70,000. So while it wasn't a huge metropolis, it certainly couldn't be considered a tiny town. Fast forward to April 25th, 1998. Natasha was 14 years old. On that day, something happened that would play an important role in this story. A 16-year-old girl disappeared without a trace, and despite searches, she was never found again. From this tragic event, it is easy to understand the atmosphere of fear that gripped the entire city. Parents were no longer relaxed when their children were out, because what had happened once could happen again. The city's mood that year was tense. Over time, people began to forget a little, but the fact that no news ever came about the missing girl never allowed anyone to feel completely safe. That same year, 1998, Natasha met a young man named Scott Black. They had a 7-year age difference. Generally, 7 years is not a huge gap, but considering that she was 14 and he was 21, the difference was significant. At 21, Scott was an adult, while Natasha was still a young girl, so her mother was understandably not thrilled about the relationship. On July 12th, 1998, Natasha went out for a walk, but didn't return home. Her mother worried went searching for her, but Natasha seemed to have vanished without a trace. Since the disappearance of the other girl was still fresh in memory, her mother feared the worst and went to the police to report her missing. Detectives began their investigation, asking the usual questions to determine if there was any reason behind her disappearance. They also questioned Scott. After all, he was Natasha's boyfriend and might know something, if not about the day she disappeared, then at least about possible motives. After various searches and interrogations, nothing came to light. Scott swore he didn't know anything, but a week after Natasha was reported missing, she was finally found in a hotel, and she wasn't alone. Natasha was discovered with Scott, the very boyfriend who claimed he knew nothing. Natasha had previously run away from home and had been spending her time in a hotel room with her boyfriend, maintaining the appearance that everything was completely normal. Eventually, she returned home to her mother, and the tension in the household was immediately apparent. The experience had left deep impressions on both mother and daughter. Scott Black, her boyfriend, faced relatively minor consequences, a fine of approximately $1,000 for obstructing the investigation, as he had been aware of Natasha's whereabouts, but had not disclosed this information. Although one might have assumed that this would be the end of the ordeal, that was far from the case. On August 31st, 1998, though some sources indicate the event may have occurred in early September, Natasha prepared for school as usual, and her mother drove her there in the morning. They said their farewells, with her mother informing her that she would collect her later in the day. When her mother returned to pick her up, she observed the students leaving, but Natasha was not among them. Initially, she believed her daughter might have been speaking with friends or lingering for some reason. Minutes passed, yet Natasha still did not appear. Increasingly concerned, her mother entered the school building to inquire further, only to discover that Natasha had not been recorded as present in the class register at all. In other words, she had never entered the school that morning. Jennifer, Natasha's mother, experienced immediate panic. She filed a missing person report for the second time in less than 2 months. The police, recalling Natasha's recent disappearance and subsequent recovery at a hotel with her boyfriend, were initially skeptical. They assumed that Natasha had once again left of her own volition and suggested that Jennifer consult Scott. However, Jennifer had a strong sense that this time was different. Natasha had been calm, composed, and seemingly content since returning from her previous disappearance. There were no signs of distress, no indications that she might run away again. Her mother's intuition told her that something was seriously wrong. Initially, authorities treated the matter as a repetition of prior incidents. Reports surfaced claiming Natasha had been seen at various locations throughout the town, once at a cinema, another time at a local store, and in other public areas. Yet such reports are common in missing person cases, often unreliable, and frequently based on mistaken identity. Natasha's appearance was ordinary. She had no distinguishing features that would make her easily recognizable in a crowd. The combination of repeated false alarms and a seemingly average appearance contributed to delays in the investigation. It was not until approximately 1 month later that law enforcement began to treat the case with the seriousness it warranted. While their initial hesitation can be understood, given that Natasha had a history of running away and the authorities had already invested considerable resources. This situation bore the hallmarks of the fable of the boy who cried wolf. Repeated warnings had diminished the credibility of any claim that she might truly be in danger. Nevertheless, this time, the authorities could no longer ignore the situation. Pressured by her parents and aware of the continued absence of Natasha, the police initiated a comprehensive investigation. They interrogated Scott Black, her friends, neighbors, and anyone who might have had relevant information. Despite their efforts, no substantive leads emerged, and Natasha's whereabouts remained unknown. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere around the case grew increasingly tense. For the local community, the disappearance of a young girl for the second time in such a short period revived fears and anxieties. Parents watched their own children more closely, and rumors circulated about possible sightings, none of which could be confirmed. Each passing day intensified the uncertainty and the sense of urgency, underscoring the delicate balance between past experiences and present danger in the investigation. For any parent, the loss of a child is undoubtedly one of the most devastating experiences imaginable. In Natasha's home, it seemed as if time had stopped on the day she disappeared. All of her belongings remained untouched. Her bed, her books, her photographs, all frozen in that moment. Afterward, there was only emptiness, partially filled by the confession of Leonard Fraser. But even that couldn't satisfy the community's and the family's need for justice. The entire Rockhampton community was united in grief and horrified by the crimes Fraser had committed. In his home, authorities discovered what could only be described as trophies from his victims, their hair tied into long ponytails. Such behavior, keeping objects from one's victims, is typical of deviant minds and serial killers. In Fraser's case, he specifically targeted women with long ponytails. On April 11, 2003, Fraser's trial for the murder of Natasha Ryan began. During the proceedings, a remarkable event occurred. Prosecutor Paul Rutledge, while delivering his opening statement, suddenly stood and declared that Fraser could not have killed Natasha because she was alive. It sounded like a scene from a television drama, but it was real. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Natasha's parents could barely comprehend what they were hearing. Imagine the disbelief of parents who had spent 5 long years searching for their daughter, resigned to her death, suddenly being told she had been found alive. Of course, alongside their joy, questions immediately arose. Where had Natasha been for 5 years? There had been no ransom demands, no letters, no calls, nothing that would indicate she had been kidnapped in the conventional sense. The prosecutor explained that he had received an anonymous tip. A voice on the other end claimed that Natasha was alive and was at the home of her boyfriend, Scott Black. Investigators rushed to Scott's residence and found her. She had spent the previous 5 years living with him. Scott, who had previously claimed not to know her whereabouts and had even been found with her in a hotel during her earlier disappearance, had concealed her existence once again. Police discovered that Natasha had lived quietly with Scott, a milkman by profession, moving between houses from Rockhampton to a nearby town about a 40-minute drive away. For most of the first 4 years, she stayed in the house in the nearby town. In the remaining time, she lived in Scott's house in Rockhampton, just minutes from her parents' home. How had no one noticed her in 5 years? Scott had family and friends who occasionally visited, and Natasha had hidden in the small wardrobe in Scott's bedroom whenever people came. She remained perfectly still and silent, often spending hours cramped inside those few feet of space. To avoid detection from neighbors, they kept the curtains drawn at all times. Natasha rarely left the house, except occasionally at night, when she would go to the beach to watch the stars and the sea. Approximately 20 days after her discovery, Natasha had to testify at Fraser's trial. Her testimony confirmed that Fraser had not committed the crime for which he was being tried. For at least this case, Natasha was alive and well. Natasha was required to testify in court, stating that she did not know Fraser and had never met him. It is a bizarre situation to imagine, attending the trial of the man accused of your supposed murder. Few people ever experience something like this. It was revealed that the reason Natasha had gone into hiding in the first place was a dispute with her mother. From that day on, she decided to live with her boyfriend, Scott, in secret. She explained that she did not want to stay at home, did not want to go to school, and simply wanted to disappear for a while. However, the situation quickly spiraled out of control, and she eventually did not know how to reveal herself safely. Another question naturally arises. Why did Fraser initially claim her murder, even providing so many details? While the exact reason is unknown, it is common for some serial killers to take credit for crimes they did not commit. It is likely that Fraser, seeing Natasha's disappearance dominating headlines, wanted to attach himself to the case, possibly to increase his own notoriety. This raises the unsettling possibility that other confessions he made, such as those involving the 3 other women, may have been exaggerated or even false. Indeed, their bodies were never recovered. Only ponytails were found in Fraser's possession. Nevertheless, authorities accepted his confessions, obtained through an informant posing as a cellmate. Fraser was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment, and he died in 2007 from a heart attack. As for Natasha, her rediscovery was met with both joy and disbelief. There was also a sense of frustration, given the enormous resources and manpower the community had invested over 5 years while she had been hiding in Scott's wardrobe. Both Natasha and Scott faced legal consequences. Natasha was fined $1,000 for causing a false investigation, relatively minor considering the circumstances. Scott, being an adult at the time, received a 3-year prison sentence, though he served only 12 months for giving false testimony. Additionally, he was fined $16,000, significantly more than Natasha, likely because of his age and responsibility. Many people speculated that Scott had coerced Natasha into orchestrating the disappearance. However, Natasha denied this in interviews, suggesting that it had been entirely her idea and that she had even persuaded Scott to cooperate. She emphasized that he was not controlling. It was her plan from the beginning. In fact, upon hearing about Fraser's alleged confession on the news, she initially thought it was some elaborate prank or a scheme by her parents to get her to return home. That was when she made the anonymous call, revealing that she was alive and staying at Scott's residence. Even after her return, trust between Natasha and her mother remained fragile, which is understandable. When asked if she could forgive her daughter, Jennifer stated that forgiveness was not the issue. The real challenge was forgetting. After all, how could one forget something like that? In interviews, Natasha was also asked why she did it, why she had left her parents in grief, convinced that she had been killed. Her response was simple. She didn't really know. She cited fear, uncertainty, and the confusion of her own emotions at the time. Interestingly, Natasha and Scott even gained financially from the story. They reportedly sold the exclusive rights to their story to a media company, which produced specials and numerous interviews. From this, the couple received around $120,000. In 2008, Natasha and Scott were married at a resort in Bayfield, with 35 guests in attendance. To capitalize on the attention surrounding their story, they also sold exclusive rights to their wedding photos, earning an additional $200,000. After the wedding, the couple retreated completely from public life, making every effort to protect their privacy. The only public record of them after that dates to 2011, when they were involved in a legal dispute following a heated argument. Scott had lost his job and had been drinking, and the altercation escalated to the point where they had to appear in court. The media coverage of the incident was brief, and soon afterward they returned to relative obscurity. As of now, Natasha and Scott are reportedly still married and have 3 children, though some sources claim 4. They maintain an exceptionally private life with no social media presence, making it extremely difficult to track any current information about them. Their story remains one of the most extraordinary and complex cases of a missing person in recent history. Thank you for listening to the story of Natasha Ryan. We'll see you next week for the next ASMR case.